Hey, this is mainly for Maddie, and she's been talking about genealogy that I thought was very interesting where she's at. So you can listen in, but I am talking to Maddie. Um, I really would love to find a copy of this book for you, and if I find it, I'll buy it and send it to you. Psychic Roots, Serendipity and Intuition in Genealogy by Henry Z. Jones Jr. Now I read you the foreword in it, which is by Helen Hinchcliffe, PhD. In 1983, in honor of my recent discovery of genealogy, my brother Timothy Hinchcliffe made a yarn painting for me entitled Old Soul. Without really knowing a genealogist's sources or methods, Tim used thousands of colored threads to depict his view that I am a sojourner between the living and the dead. Coincidentally, the picture captured the essence of this book. In the lower left corner, lighting my path with magic crystals, is Old Soul, most easily imagined as a friendly white ghost. In the center are my ancestors, ranged in a circle. They are connected by a mysterious umbilical cord to Old Soul and to a second circle composed of my living relatives who reside in the upper right corner. Guided by Old Soul, I travel a path between them, learning from each, communing with each. Many of the contributors to this book know of Old Soul, although they might call him by another name. Within these pages you will encounter the great God of genealogy, fate, providence, God, regardless of the name that is used. All who sense this force report that it empowers them to get in touch with and to learn from their ancestors. Excuse me. Others report no overarching force at work on their behalf. However, some point to ancestors who have beckoned to them, led them, or otherwise made their presence known. It appears that untold numbers of ancestors have asked to be understood and to have their stories told fully and accurately. They call to us so persistently and with such apparent feeling that we who hear their pleas are motivated to cast aside all other pursuits to do their bidding. Perhaps Hank Jones expresses this phenomenon best when describing his love affair with his Palatines. I can't explain why I dropped all other genealogical investigations to, to commit myself to the Palatines, but I did. It was as if nothing else mattered. The Palatines became my calling, and I felt it was my mission to tell their story. Hank has also felt urged to reach out to his genealogical colleagues, inviting them to share with him, and ultimately with you, the often highly intimate experiences we have had with those on the other side. The result is psychic roots, serendipity, and intuition in genealogy. The voices may differ, but I hear many of the same beckoning messages that Hank hears, so I was delighted when he asked me to write this foreword. What then is this book about? If I were allowed only one sentence, I would say this. Psychic Roots shows how feeling about one's ancestors, as well as thinking about them, usually results in a more successful search. Certainly, the research process is far more thrilling. During a recent lecture, I announced to my audience, I love Helen Law. This intimate statement was unplanned. It simply happened in an impromptu moment of passion. Some people might scoff and remark disparagingly that she has been dead for over 200 years. How could I possibly love her? But it was and is an expression of true and valid feeling. Why should I not love this woman? During the past 2 years, she has played a major part in my life. Helen Law has drawn me again and again to Aberdeen, Scotland, where she lived for some 30 years in the mid-18th century. Each time I have wanted to learn more about her. During each visit, more of her has been revealed. She was an active woman about whom many records were created. So far, I have found her name recorded 52 times. Until recently, Scottish women kept their maiden or birth names, making it easier to reconstruct her life. For a few of her some 70 years, I know what she was doing and where she was doing it almost on a daily basis. Despite the fact that she could not write her name, court documents record some of her story in her own words. I know many of her tribulations and can imagine the pain she must have felt. I also know some wonderful moments in her life and can share in the thrill she probably felt. Within the pages of Psychic Roots, you will find the stories of dozens of genealogists who have had similarly intimate experiences with ancestors long since departed. A rational being knows that having passionate feelings for an ancestor is not enough. Many of the records about Helen Law have required me to think long and hard. I have drawn inferences from bits and pieces of knowledge about her. I have formulated these inferences into hypotheses susceptible to testing, and I have searched for evidence to test them. That thoughtful search has opened up records I would otherwise never have seen. By now, Judith Cripps, the city archivist in Aberdeen, is well attuned to my keen interest in the lives of my ancestors, and knows that I can usually report where they were living at any given date. Helen Law and her husband, William Edward, were living in Aberdeen in 1741, so she suggested that I search a record series naming hundreds of people who had purchased oatmeal from the town at a cut-rate price during the famine that year. The lists were made almost daily from January to June, so it seemed an impossible task to check every name. I set them aside. But then I remembered a date that I could use to formulate a hypothesis. William Edward had been banished from the town as an outsider, unable to earn a living. May 17th, 1741 was the date on which he was to depart Aberdeen. Perhaps I could find his name among the oatmeal purchasers during the week prior to that date, and then discover it missing thereafter. The results were better than anticipated. William Edward made his last purchase on 16th May, and Helen Law bought the family oatmeal from 18th May, 1741, until the town's supplies finally ran out. A subsequent search of the list for the entire period told me how much the Edward Law family had to eat that winter, if no other food was available, and other town records suggest there was none. Then it is clear that the family was starving. Some of my fellow contributors talk of hunches and their intuition. I prefer the language of scientific method, but whether we test a formal hypothesis or follow up on an informal hunch, whether our thinking was conscious or apparently subconscious, the results of our mental processes have often produced wonderfully rich rewards. Nevertheless, some of my best finds have been serendipitous. I have found facts about Helen Law when actually I was looking for information about somebody or something else. Perhaps my most wonderful serendipitous experience was my discovery of her second husband, John Fraser Horsehire. This was a man about whom I had known nothing. Their contract to marry was not recorded in the St. Nicholas, Aberdeen Parish Marriage Register. It happened like this. I was looking in the back of Volume 6 of Aberdeen Warrants, hoping to find a list of people who, like William Edward, had been expelled from Aberdeen. Volume 5 had contained such a list, and I wanted to check for more. Volume 6 covers the period 27th of December 1749 through 1757, and written on the inside of its back cover was an idiosyncratic record. It was an agreement by Helen Law, relict of John Fraser Horsehire, and her subtenants to vacate premises described as the middle flat outside the Justice Port, owned by John Smith, shoemaker. The discovery of this document is all the more remarkable because it was dated 10th November 1749. I might have missed it entirely, except that Helen Law's mark was a beacon. I had seen her mark before, and it was fixed in my memory. The pages of Psychic Roots are filled with many stories such as this. Why do some of us genealogists have these and other seemingly non-rational experiences? When this book was gestating within Hank's heart and soul, he searched widely for answers. He did not have tunnel vision, as many of us often do. He was receptive to all possible explanations. These pages explore such topics as synchronicity, events that happen simultaneously with no apparent causal connection, but with deep significance for those who experience them. Numeracy, the mathematical probability of having a connection with any person you may happen to meet. Intuition, a seeming sixth sense that a record will appear where it may or may not belong. Genetic memory, the possibility that we inherit from our forebears some of the facts about our heritage. With the help of his colleagues, Hank explores each of them. You may not find a satisfying answer at the end of every explanatory avenue, but the very least you owe to yourself, to your ancestors, and to your descendants is to investigate each one. And this was Helen Hinchcliffe, Fulford Harbor, Canada, Easter 1993. Oh, the stories in here are so fascinating. And you know, my Aunt Jo, she went climbing family trees on the on their side of the family, the Kitleys and all they were kin to. So a lot of these stories in here are actually German people studying climbing their family trees and finding their ancestors as well. And the things in here, you will know more about than a lot of other people, as they really don't know about these gifts and abilities people have. In fact, I think they really said they were bad, and people wasn't supposed to do it or anything. And I think that was just a reason, because it scared a lot of these logical type people who accept nothing but something they can touch and feel and all this kind of stuff. Well, there's a little piece in here that I'll read to you and kind of tell you about the gist of some of these stories in here, and it is fascinating. I just know you'll like it, especially since you've got such a great interest in genealogy. Many people find it hard to acknowledge and accept gifts, such as Helen possesses. The old values die very hard. So many of us still cling to the tenets of the Newtonian revolution, which enthrone causality as absolute ruler of matter and mind. Everything had to have a logical cause and effect, and if it didn't and couldn't be explained, its worth was negated. As Dr. Laurie Nadell reflects in her book Sixth Sense, most of us are conditioned not to make full use of our intuitive abilities. In fact, many of us are conditioned not to rely on them at all. From earliest childhood, we are praised and rewarded for performing mental feats involving logic, memory, and other measurable cognitive skills. The entire foundation of our traditional education system is predicated on the belief that these skills are superior to other mental abilities, such as imagination and intuition, which can be experienced quantitatively, but which do not lend themselves to the same kind of quantitative measuring as do memory and logic. In other words, intuition cannot be tested and measured in the same way as arithmetic can be tested. Thus, you learn early on in life to program your mind to use only a limited part of its ability in performing all its tasks. It's as though you were taught how to drive with the advisory to use only your frontal vision and to exclude your spherical vision. It's so sad. Many of us were brought up to believe that non-rational, means irrational. Irrational, in turn, implies emotional, out of control, and possibly even crazy. Yeah. But finally, we are awakening. The times they are a changing. The validity of the unconscious and its impact upon our lives has been established by psychiatry, and other branches of science have followed suit in opening up new avenues of exploration. As Arthur Kessler so eloquently states, the odor of the alchemist's kitchen has been replaced by the smell of quark in the laboratory. The rapprochement between the conceptual world of parapsychology and that of modern physics is an important step towards the demolition of the greatest superstition of our age, the materialistic clockwork universe of early 19th century physics. And that has a good point because even the Bible will tell you you're not supposed to be using superstition. That is kind of a adultery type thing to be superstitious. And we had a grandpa that was superstitious, but he was Irish and part Indian too. Apropos of this, as we look at intuition, it is helpful to remember that what was yesterday's folly is today's fact. Until the 13th century, man did not realize that he was surrounded by magnetic forces. They've been proved to exist, but we still have no direct sensory awareness of them. And until the mid-19th century, hypnosis was treated as an occult fancy by Western science. Today, it has become so respectable and commonplace that we are apt to forget that we have no explanation for it. The whole nature of the process of discovery is an intriguing area for thought and reflection. Jane Fletcher Fisk reflects. Certainly, as genealogists, we should apply every scientific standard we can to our research and our work. In our efforts to be scientific, however, we should not lose sight of the fact that many of the greatest discoveries in science have been first conceived through the vision of minds open to intuition. I'm not advocating Ouija board genealogy, but I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I can understand all there is to know, even about my own field, and I don't really want to. Life is an ongoing mystery with volumes yet to be written. And if I thought I could achieve total rational control of even my corner of it, the world would cease at that moment to be interesting. Jane echoes the views of the great Albert Einstein, who placed a high value on his intuition when he wrote, "The intellect has little to do on the road to discovery. There comes a leap of consciousness, call it intuition or what you will, and the solution comes to you, and you don't know how or why." Former NASA astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who conducted in-flight experiments in ESP with professional psychics back on Earth with a success rate far greater than predicted by chance, founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences upon his return to study this phenomenon. Mitchell has stated his belief that the psychic component of the intuitive function, that is, the ability to perceive information in ways unexplainable, is a natural part of the universe. It is available to everyone. And so I think you really, really, really find this very fascinating and informative and educational because you know you got some gifts yourself. Yeah, it's been running through our family, and I kind of wonder which side it comes from most strongly. And in fact, some of the things, the beings that I've seen, I kind of wonder it was sort of like a shamanistic experience that some of the books I read about shamans and how they experience things kind of reminded me maybe it could have been some of my ancestors that I've seen and even gotten pictures of. So you really don't know how they might get away with it, may not look as normal as they would have back in those days. I don't know. But I'm still studying on this. But I don't think they're ETs. I think they're many species of invisible people. And even the Bible tells of the dead that came back to talk to some people. Although that was supposed to be against their rules and things. And that's another part that I need to study. But I really think you ought to read this book. And if I find a copy, I'll buy it and send it to you, darling. I sure love you. I miss you so much. I want to hug you. Love you. See you later. Talk to you later. Have a great day or night.